Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Ripple executive says Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP hit with surprising levels of hostility to innovation. This is coming from a video in which David Schwartz is speaking. Of course, David Schwartz being Ripple's CTO and co-creator of the XRP ledger. And I found his perspective to be rather fascinating, so I want to share it with you and my take on it as well. And also, by the way, while I'm speaking for just a moment, here's an entertaining video for you to look at if you care to, unrelated to crypto. Before we go any further, if you would please delicately tap that like button. And also, if you are a fan of Ripple and XRP, go ahead and treat yourself, girl, by subscribing to the Moon Lambo channel, which is the best channel on all of the YouTubes. That's a cold, hard fact, my friend. So into this piece now. Ripple CTO David Schwartz says surprising levels of hostility in the crypto community are hampering the growth of the industry as a whole. During the virtual Blockdown 2020 conference, Schwartz said crypto owners tend to get tribal due to their desire to earn a return on investment, showing remarkable levels of animosity toward rival technologies. And I like the timeless. This seems to keep happening lately. I'll talk about something, and then there's an article relating to whatever I'm talking about, like the day later. I made a video where I was talking about just the toxicity that comes from tribalism, and I think that a lot of it, just my humble opinion, a lot of it does result, and I spoke more so about just this one aspect, of course there's more to it, but just the idea of ideologically being tied to something. If it's part of your identity in particular, like if you're a down with the banks, down with the government type of guy, Bitcoin Maxitrol, Bitcoin Maxitrol, down with banks, down with government, Bitcoin for all. If you're one of those, it's gonna be tough to look past that, if that's where you're coming from. One thing that I don't think I spoke about in that video is just that the concept of, and it's totally legit, it's what David Schwartz is talking about here, just the idea of just having that additional monetary incentive. Now here's a quote from David Schwartz. I think the one thing that is kind of surprising to me is the sort of hostility to innovation in a lot of the space. A lot of that comes from people who have invested heavily in a project. I can't talk about the cryptocurrency space without facing the reality that if you think Bitcoin is going to take over the world, you probably own some Bitcoin. If you think Ethereum is going to take over, you probably own some Ether. If you think the XRP ledger is the greatest thing in the world and everyone's going to use it for everything, you probably hold some XRP. And indeed, I do think that XRP is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Can you imagine? It was tough times making a sandwich before people figured out you could slice bread. Like, they were using entire loaves as sandwich slices, effectively. Making some ridiculous sandwiches, man. Anyway, Schwartz explains the implications of cherry-picking the perceived flaws of a digital asset. And here's another quote. If someone tells you, hey, Bitcoin has this problem, or Ethereum has this problem, or the XRP ledger has this weakness, if they're right, then you will perceive yourself as losing money. Exactly, and this is what I kind of hate about this. It's when you're speaking to, for instance, my favorites, Bitcoin Maxi trolls, you can tell them things, you can tell them cold, hard facts, and if it's a threat to them, they could even potentially know it's true, and damn it, they just don't want to admit it. Humans have a tendency to not want to admit when they're wrong. It's tough. But it's, it just in my 37 years of life here, I've got a little bit of experience, and it's easier to admit you're wrong if you're not making whatever it is that you're discussing, if it's not part of your identity. I'm just saying, man. So maybe just don't let that happen, right? I mean, we're talking about a cryptocurrency here, damn it. And plus, even if you lie about it, in terms of what's actually going to get adopted, it's not going to matter because utility's going to win out anyway. So why be a disingenuous bastard? Like, I wouldn't want to live life like that. But here's the rest of the quote. What happens is people dig in very, very deeply, and nobody is invested in the project that doesn't exist yet. And so there's this sort of hostility to innovation. Yeah, ain't that the truth? My gosh, it's hostile. Schwartz cites Bitcoin as an example, explaining why investors of the King coin may not welcome improvements in other cryptocurrencies. And I love this one too. Check out this quote. This is, again, of course, also from David Schwartz. The Lightning Network is something that enhances Bitcoin's usability, and so If you're a Bitcoin maximalist, you like the Lightning Network. It is good innovation, whereas if Ethereum is improving its scalability, and you could perceive that as a threat to Bitcoin, you would sort of perceive that as bad innovation. And don't you see that? And why do you think XRP is getting picked on? Yes, of course, part of it is simply that Ripple's positioning XRP to help the legacy financial system to improve it, to position XRP as a bridge currency, meaning faster transactions for banks and remittance companies. Yeah, that's a problem if you're a down with the banks, down with the government type of guy. Absolutely. If that's your position, of course, you don't like that. But if XRP weren't gaining real-world adoption, do you think that the Bitcoin Maxitrolls would be talking about it as frequently and as extremely consistently as they are? No, I've always believed that a huge percentage of them must perceive it as an actual threat, which is fascinating to me because although Bitcoin and XRP could be used interchangeably for any use case, really, as far as I can think of anyway. Now, of course, it's not to say that they both do in each job equally well. Obviously, XRP is technologically superior, but they could be plugged in. Like, you could plug Bitcoin in as a bridge currency if Ripple wanted to program that into the on-demand liquidity. And they're not for a good reason. I mean, they've got a bunch of XRP. That's where their incentives are, but they could, if they wanted to, plug in Bitcoin. And so either coin could be used for any purpose, right? It's the case that XRP is actually gaining adoption here, and Bitcoin is not. But that's what really makes it so silly to me, you know. Just the idea that because there's real world adoption, and Bitcoin isn't actually functionally being used for anything, it's time to just tear it down. Why not just be happy that cryptocurrency is getting used for anything, you know? And so it's just the psyche of a Bitcoin maxi troll is interesting and sometimes hysterical to me. Now, the Ripple executive also says that he experienced the same frustrating phenomenon and lack of unity in the legacy financial system. Actually, before I go further, I wanted to mention this too. As far as Lightning Network, most people probably don't know this, I suspect. But Lightning Network, if it works, even if it doesn't work, it can be plugged into pretty much any blockchain, including XRP. Did you know that? It's not just for Bitcoin. You know, you're talking about basically a bunch of payment channels. You can use it for almost any blockchain. Anyway, here's another quote from David Schwartz now. All the existing banks and financial institutions want you to build on top of their existing technology because that's what enriches them. The same thing has happened in the cryptocurrency community. People are now saying, no, build on top of Bitcoin because I'm invested in it. Build on top of Ethereum because I'm invested in it. Don't build new technologies that are better or that threaten the incumbents. Bitcoin was like a radical movement, and now it's institutions that people... it's the institution that people don't want you to threaten now. And I think that's a very fair point. And I will say this, of course, coming as an XRP holder myself, and this is, of course, an XRP-centric channel, damn it. I want to see all sorts of building on top of the XRP ledger, but where I differ from a maximalist, obviously, is I want other cryptocurrencies to have success as well for various use cases. And I think that that's going to create a bigger pie for everybody. I think more money will flow into this asset class on the whole. And think about the institutional money when it comes in an increasingly notable fashion. What's that going to mean, even if you just get a little percentage of it going into XRP? If it's money that wouldn't otherwise have noticed the asset class based on other developments on other blockchains, I mean, think about that. That's why it's so silly to be a freaking maximalist of anything. Speaking to that, and I think that was okay. So speaking of that, here's a tweet that I caught before recording this. I just came across this in my feed. This is actually from a few days ago, but it's from my fellow XRP YouTuber, Crypto Eddie. And it just fit in perfectly, so I had to share this here. Tried to give heads up to Tone in his live streams, that'd be Tone Vase, just now, for Pay ID. Totally timed out immediately because, well, he and his followers remain to be a frog in a well. Makes me sad for entire ecosystem. This is why the Bitcoin maxis remain at a disadvantage. Anthony Pompliano, help. And so I guess I'm not sure if there's a specific reason for tagging Anthony Pompliano. Obviously, he's kind of like a maxi type of guy, but he's a cool dude. Like, he's very kind. He's not ripping down other projects ever. So, yeah, I mean, I still don't think it makes sense to be a maxi, but if you're going to be at least, be a cordial adult about it. Because here's a screen grab that she shared from Tone Vei's live stream here, and she wrote, Ripple Spring just launched Pay ID with 40 huge players in this space. Bitcoin got hijacked. The future is in cloud payments. And then you can see right here, and they timed her out, you have been placed in timeout by the owner of this video or moderator. Edit and try again. Yep, you don't want to hear anything. It's just like, I joke about this being an echo chamber, I mean, maybe there's truth to that in like any group, technically, but talk about a crazy echo chamber here. My gosh, to be in the world of Bitcoin, it's just completely freaking ridiculous here. And to wrap up the video, let's share with you this little GIF here. This comes from JWM7, who tagged me, Moon Lambo, and wrote, Bitcoin Maxitrol with several laughy faces. And indeed, and so this is from, I know this is from a Gremlins movie. I believe it's Gremlins 2. And that is just one beautiful Bitcoin Maxitrol. Look at this thing. Man, I'm a Bitcoin Maxitrol. Just hanging out under my bridge. Living my best Bitcoin Maxitrol life. Staying warm by my garbage fire. Gotta go, I'm hungry, gonna eat my room temperature cottage cheese. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm also not a Bitcoin Maxitrol. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Lambo.